To follow up on our discussion of clinical data management systems and electronic data capture systems, this week we want to talk about coding dictionaries, what they are, how they're used, and why they're important in conducting clinical trials. So we have a couple of learning objectives that we want to go over. First of all, we want to understand what coding dictionaries are and how they're used. We want to understand why coding dictionaries are necessary, and we want to discuss autocoders and what they do. And we also want to discuss the coding process and how it works. This will get you oriented to how to use these coding dictionaries and what they're used for and what their importance is. So let's start by talking about what are coding dictionaries. Some of you may not be familiar with these, but you will be as we move throughout the lecture. So what these are, they are programs that contain consistent terminology for various clinical terms used to describe or identify clinical data. Examples of these could be adverse event terms, could be medical history terms, or they could be the names of medications or drugs that a patient is using during the trial. So why are they necessary? First of all, they're necessary to provide consistent terminology that can be analyzed. Remember, the purpose of our trial is to create a data set that can be analyzed to determine whether or not our drug is safe and effective. And the use of these dictionaries helps us use consistent terminology that facilitate that process. They're also used in order for data to be analyzed. It must be countable, and the values must be identical to be countable. So in other words, we have to have consistent terminology to determine whether or not that particular item can be counted for the purposes of our statistical analysis. So free text is not countable and must be converted to either a common term or a number. And we'll explain how this is done. So as you may remember, when we talked back into our CRF design class, we talked about the use of free text and how we want to avoid that as much as possible, and we want to use countable data that we can get a good data set from, that we can perform some analysis with. So why do we need coding? Well, essentially, we need coding to maintain a high level of consistency. And this is going to ensure a high level of data quality. And the way we define that is data that can be analyzed or analyzable. So let's take a look at some examples, what these might look like. If you were to look at two terms, say Tylenol versus acetaminophen, these are medications that you're familiar with. Some of you have probably taken them in the past. You can buy them freely over the counter at most grocery stores, drug stores, Walmart, etc. But we know that Tylenol is a brand name for acetaminophen. If we go buy the Walmart brand, it's not going to say Tylenol on it, but it's going to be essentially the same drug. So therapeutically, they should be similar. Well, in the course of our trial, we may have concomitant medication pages where the site enters Tylenol 1 week, then the next time another patient comes in, they might enter acetaminophen. They might have more than one person entering the data, and they enter it differently. It doesn't mean it's wrong, but it does mean that it's inconsistent. So what we're going to try to do is use one of our coding dictionaries to maintain some consistent data so that we know that every time we see one of those terms, we're really talking about the same thing. You might see stomachache versus nausea, or you might see heartburn versus gastritis. So once again, we want these terms to be as consistent as possible so that it can provide us with a high level of analysis. So let's talk about the process for coding. Coding can occur at 2 points during the clinical trial. It can occur before the trial begins as part of the CRF development effort. And hopefully by doing that, we can cut down on the amount of use that these dictionaries have. It can also occur during or after the trial, so coding is assigned by sponsors and determines which terms will be used. So these are the times at which we're going to use these dictionaries during the course of our trial. So we would use these dictionaries in a couple of different scenarios. First of all, we may have large data sets that contain many terms and possible responses. This would be a way for us to cut down on the number of unique responses and hopefully combine those into similar responses in other places. We also would organize terms into categories such as body system, medication class, etc. That would be used for a coding dictionary. And also the data management team is going to assign terms with review by a medical monitor or other medical staff. So these will be some of the uses of when we would use a coding dictionary. Two of the more common dictionaries that you'll run across when you're conducting a clinical trial are going to be the Medical Dictionary for Regulatory Activities, and that's abbreviated as MedDRA, and you'll hear it pronounced that way. And then you'll also run across the World Health Organization or WHODrug dictionary. The MedDRA dictionary covers, as you might imagine, medical terminology, and the WHODrug dictionary covers the names of drugs and medications. So let's take a look at the MedDRA dictionary. It is a list of validated medical terminology used to classify adverse event information. It's also used to classify medical history terminology as well. It's developed by the International Conference on Harmonization, which is an international organization made up of professionals around the world that develops guidelines and tools for how to conduct clinical trials. Also, it's an international organization, maintains and updates the MedDRA dictionary and licenses and distributes the dictionary. So we'll go into a little bit more of that in detail as we go along. But essentially, these are the three major components of the MedDRA dictionary. So in addition, although not a regulatory requirement, most major regulatory agencies recommend using the MedDRA dictionary. Some of these around the world include the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA, the European Medicines Agency, also regulatory agencies in Japan and Canada. The FDA requires MedDRA for all post-marketing safety reports. We'll get into those a little bit as we go along. EMA, or the European Medicines Agency, requires the MedDRA dictionary for serious adverse event reports. And we'll get into those as we go along as well. The WHODrug dictionary is created by the World Health Organization Program for International Drug Monitoring. It's going to be used to identify medical product information, mostly drugs, but it can also include other medicinal products in addition to drugs. So it's used to identify drugs by name, by active ingredient, and by therapeutic use. So, and it also includes trade and generic names. So most of the common drugs that we'll see in use around the world are going to be contained in that World Health Organization drug dictionary. We're going to go into a little bit more detail with that as we go along. So what we want to talk about next are going to be the uses of autocoding systems. And what these do, these are computer programs that code data into our database. And they work very similar to the way you would use, say, a dictionary in, say, Microsoft Word or a spell checker. So what happens is you've got CRF entries that are entered by the site, and then they're compared to the preferred entry that's in the dictionary, whether it's for a drug or for a medical diagnosis. And then as it works, then the preferred term is used when a match occurs. So entries that don't have a match, they're going to be reviewed, and sometimes they may be sent to the site for additional clarification. So if you want to see how these, a simple way of these autocoding systems, how they work, read the scenario on page 223 and 224 in your textbook. It'll describe how a site enters a specific term, and then the autocoder checks it and then doesn't find it, but then the user then updates the preferred term so that the next time the verbatim term is entered by the site on the CRF page, it will get checked and it will get converted into the preferred term. That way, all of our terminology is going to be consistent throughout the trial. So let's take a look at the scope of the MedDRA Dictionary to have a little better understanding of what it looks like. If you look at the scenario that you see online here, the items that you see inside the circle are the things that are part of the dictionary. So you've got diseases, diagnoses, you've got other medication errors, therapeutic indications, symptoms. Those would be things that a site might enter for a medical diagnosis on a CRF page. Everything that's outside is really not part of the dictionary. So it's not a drug dictionary. It doesn't have demographic terms. It's not a term. It's not a dictionary of clinical trial study design terms, those kinds of things. So we're really after the medical diagnoses and the associated symptoms and other terminology that's associated with those. So let's take a look at the structure of the MedDRA Dictionary. At the very top level, you have your System Organ Class, or SOC, S-O-C, and there are 26 of these. We'll go into them in a little more detail here in just a moment. And then as we progress down the chain here, we just see where we're progressively getting more and more pieces of terminology. So we'll progress to a high-level group term, a high-level term, and then a preferred term, and then finally down to the lowest level term. As you can see in our dictionary, the lowest level term is populated by greater than 70,000 different terms. So as you can see, it's a pretty expansive dictionary. So to further explain that hierarchy, let's take a look at each of the terms. So the system organ class is going to be the highest level of terminology, and it's going to distinguish by the anatomical and physiological system, as well as a few other areas of classification. Then as you progress down, you're going to get all the way down to the lowest level of terminology, which could also include some pseudonyms, some similar terms. But at each progression along the way, we're going to add a little more detail to it. So what we are hoping to do with our dictionary is get down to the preferred term, which is what we want to use in our clinical trial to identify those medical diagnoses that the patient is going to experience during the course of the trial. So here's a listing of the 26 system organ classes. As you can see, they cover each of the systems that we have throughout the body: cardiac disorders, eye disorders. I'm just going down the list here, all the way down to vascular disorders. These are in alphabetical order, by the way, but these will be the highest level systems that we'll start with, and then we'll progressively get into more detail as we move along. This graphic shows an example of what this would look like. We're starting out with our system organization class of cardiac disorders, and then we're moving from there to our high level terminology, which is going to be the cardiac arrhythmias. And then we move into even more further classification, which in our case would be rate and rhythm disorders. And then finally to our preferred term, which is arrhythmia. And as you can see, we have several lowest level terms that we see here, such as arrhythmia, dysrhythmia. There are a few others as well. So all of these are going to be, if a site were to enter those terms into a CRF page, we would further convert them using the dictionary to the preferred term of arrhythmia. During the course of our trial, we may encounter some non-current terms. These are just terms that we probably do not want to use. Non-current terms are flagged at the lowest level terminology within the dictionary. As I said before, they're not recommended for use. And then these are going to be terms that are either vague or ambiguous. They might be misspelled for some reason. They might be truncated. They could be an abbreviation, for example. But we want to stay away from these non-current terms as much as we can. So as we talked about earlier in our discussion of clinical databases, we wanted to use as many codes and as many specific pieces of information as we could that can be countable. So the way this works with our coding dictionary is that the MedDRA codes, the terms themselves, are assigned to an 8-digit numeric code. The code is non-expressive, which means that you can't look at the code and determine, what information is going to be contained in that particular code. Now, codes can fulfill a data field in various electronic submission types. For example, an E2B format for submitting individual case safety reports. And then new terms are going to be assigned sequentially as they're added to our database. So in the end of our trial, we're going to be able to convert each of our medical history items and each of our adverse event items to an 8-digit numeric code that can then be analyzed by our statistical team. Our dictionary is also going to use something called multi-axial terminology. What this means is multi-axial means that the representation of a medical concept is within multiple system organ classifications. So what it allows us to do, it allows grouping by different classifications. It also allows retrieval and presentation via different data sets. So the purpose of the primary system organ classification is to determine which system organ classification will represent the preferred term during the cumulative data outputs and is used to support consistent data representation for reporting to regulators. We'll get into this here in our illustration here in just a moment. This diagram shows an example of multi-axial terminology and how we might use it. If we start on the left side of our graphic, we see that we have a system organ classification is equal to a respiratory, thoracic, and mediastinal disorders. And then if we move down to the next level, to our highest level group terminology, that would be equal to respiratory tract infection. And then to further classify that with the highest level terminology, we have viral upper respiratory tract infections. Finally, to our preferred term of influenza. If we look at the other side of the diagram, we have a system organization classification of infections and infestations, followed by viral infection disorders, and then finally influenza viral infections, and then finally to the preferred term of influenza. So we can get to our preferred term by going through two different system organ classes. So this would be an example of how the preferred term influenza would actually apply to two different system organ classes. There are going to be some preferred terms that only appear in one system order class. And we'll see these in the system organ classes of investigations, surgical and medical procedures, and social circumstances. So these are not considered multi-axial. And if you go back to the earlier slide where we illustrated all 26 of the system organ classes, you'll see that the names that are highlighted in blue are examples of these preferred terms that only appear in these in particular system organ classes. So going back to our example of arrhythmias, this is what the folder tree might look like on the MedDRA Dictionary. So we had cardiac disorders followed by cardiac arrhythmias, rate and rhythm disorders, and then finally to the preferred term of arrhythmia. And then as you can see there in our diagram, we've got a number of different, I guess, common terms, lowest level terms that could be associated with the preferred term of arrhythmia. So you can see them there. Dysrhythmia is one, arrhythmia, cardiac arrhythmia. There could be a multitude of those, but eventually we want to get to the preferred term, which in this case is the preferred term of arrhythmia. So in this example, we see a couple of lowest level terms that can be very different depending on how they're spelled. So if we look here, what we're after, we want to get to the lowest level term, and then from there identify what the preferred term is. So the way we do that is by determining what most accurately reflects the reported verbatim information that we receive from the site. So in our example, we have a couple of instances where a single letter can sometimes change that, can sometimes have an effect on that. So if we look at our example, we have a reported medical condition of lip sore. And if we look at over in the second column of our table, the lowest level term that's selected is going to be lip sore, and our preferred term is going to be lip pain. So if we look at the one below that, it says lip sores, so implying there's more than one. So if we look at the next column over, sores on the lip, a preferred term is cheilitis. So we can see where some of these terms are going to change depending on how the verbatim is reported by the site. So what we want to do is get to the lowest level term and then associate that with whatever the preferred term is that's in our dictionary. So in some cases, our medical staff is going to have to use certain medical judgment in order to identify what the lowest level term is. And so in our example here, we have a reported term of brittle hair. And then we have a lowest level term selected equal to hair breakage. So in the comment section, we see that there's no MedDRA term for brittle hair, and the lowest level term, hair breakage, more accurately reflects the reported concept than the less specific lowest level term of hair disorder. So this could be an example of how we might have to use our judgment to associate the right term for that medical verbatim. So next we're going to talk about the World Health Organization's Drug Dictionary. So the World Health Organization Drug Dictionary is administered and licensed by the World Health Organization's Uppsala Monitoring Center. So the UMC collaborates with regulators and researchers and professionals around the world, and what it does, it comes up with a dictionary that accurately defines drugs and medications from around the world so that it can be consistent for the use in conducting clinical trials and also in regulating the use of drugs within clinical trials. So the Uppsala Monitoring Center creates the World Health Organization Drug Dictionaries, and these optimize the global coding, analysis, and reporting of medical product information from clinical trials and drug safety. What it does, it allows users to apply the same drug coding principles across multiple applications. For example, multiple protocols, programs, or clinical programs, and it maintains a dictionary so that we have consistent use of these names all around the world. So the drug dictionary's purpose is to classify medications that may have multiple names into one consistent name. So as you can imagine, this is going to aid in the coding of medications that are listed on concomitant medication pages in case report forms in clinical trials. So an example of this might be, we see the term Tylenol, we see the term acetaminophen, we see paracetamol contain the same active ingredient. So the World Health Organization Drug Dictionary classifies these as paracetamol. So that we were using the same name for each of these medications throughout the course of our trial. So what are these dictionaries and how are they used? Well, they're used by pharmaceutical companies, clinical research organizations, regulatory agencies to code and analyze medical products that are used in clinical data or case report forms or post-marketing surveillance efforts. Then they're used to take the case report form data or the verbatim that's entered by the site, and then they're going to code it based on the data supplied, such as the trade name or the substance. And then once we do that, then we're going to find the verbatim names and translate them into code, and that's going to be entered into the clinical data set. So the formatting is going to be formatted to allow analysis of coded data. This allows drug companies and regulators to identify substances that may interact with investigative products or the product that we're studying in our clinical trial, the product that's not yet approved. And then it also allows for the retrieval of all information that's related to a specific drug in a data set. So the different types of dictionaries include the World Health Organization Drug Dictionary Enhanced. We also have the Basic Drug Dictionary, the Herbal Dictionary, and then we can also have combined dictionaries. We'll go over those in just a moment. So let's look at the World Health Organization Drug Dictionary Enhanced. It contains the most comprehensive data on drugs and medications from around the world. It includes the basic World Health Organization Drug Dictionary plus additional entries from IMS Health. IMS Health is an organization that collects drug utilization data from around the world. It integrates and formats the IMS supplied data into the same coding structure that's used in the World Health Organization Drug Dictionary. And it's called Enhanced because it includes this additional IMS data. So the next level down is going to be the World Health Organization Basic Drug Dictionary. So it contains the original drug dictionary. It's also available to users on a paid subscription basis, but it does not include any of the IMS supplied data that we talked about in the earlier slide. It's also going to be coded with the Anatomical Therapeutic Chemical Classification, or ATC. We'll see how that works in just a moment. Then we also have the World Health Organization Herbal Dictionary. So it represents drugs of a natural origin or herbs, provides better coding for herbal information. It also increases the understanding of the interaction between herbal products and other medicinal products. This is very useful when we conduct a fairly comprehensive clinical trial in understanding how those different medications interact. It's going to be coded with the Herbal Anatomical Therapeutic Chemical Classification, otherwise known as HATC. So then we come to our combined dictionaries, and our combined dictionaries occur when more than one dictionary is distributed at the same time. In other words, it's not just a standalone dictionary. It's distributed in the same format to facilitate the loading of those terms into our database. And then it also contains the highest possible coverage of drug names that are likely to appear in our verbatim data that we receive from the sites on our CRF pages. So as far as the dictionary content, the types of products that are going to be listed in both the drug dictionary and the Drug Dictionary Enhanced are going to be medicinal product information, herbal remedies, vaccines, dietary supplements, radiopharmaceutical products, also blood products, and also diagnostic agents. So any of these medications or drugs could appear in our dictionary. So the World Health Organization Herbal Dictionary contains only products that have only an active ingredient of natural origin. So it's going to be only, the only product type is going to be herbal remedies that you may be familiar with. So the dictionaries include two basic formats. We call them B and C. So B formats translate the drug name based on active ingredients, the drug codes, the ATC codes, etc. And then C formats include information about the drugs marketed in different countries and information about the pharmaceutical company itself. These are coded as the Medicinal Product ID. So we're going to talk about the Medicinal Product ID components. So the Medicinal Product ID is unique for each entry in the C format, and it identifies the unique combination of the following items. We're going to have the medicinal product name. Also, we'll have a name specifier. And then we'll have a drug code, which is going to be the drug record number plus sequence 1 and plus sequence 2. We'll have the market authorization holder, which is going to be the name of the pharmaceutical company. We'll have the country that it's authorized to be administered in. We'll have the pharmaceutical form, which will be sequence 3. Then we'll have the strength available, which will be sequence 4. So it's important to understand no two entries can be alike. So if one of the 7 of these items is different, it's a new entry. Our upcoming example will illustrate this. So this table shows an example of a C format with the medical products ID in the first column, and then I'll also include the marketing authorization holder and the country that it's authorized for marketing use in. So if you look down at the bottom, in this example, several of the entries are available for the drug Bezalip. The entry in the medical product ID column in the first line is 067763. You can see that on line 1. It only shows the information about the name and the active ingredient through the drug code. So the other 3 entries that are below there contain additional information. So as you can see, you see where in the MAH column, the marketing authorization holder, you can see Hoffman LaRoche has been added there. You can also see in the country column where Canada has been added. And then you can see where in sequence 3 and 4, the labeling of coated tablets and then 400 milligrams is added in the final sequence there on that last row. So as you can see, each of those lines has a unique medical product ID. So that identifies the differences in each of the 3. So for your assignment for this week, I want you to read chapter 26 in your textbook, which discusses coding dictionaries. And then your Blackboard assignment will be, in your words, what's the principal reason why the use of coding dictionaries is important in clinical trials. So go ahead and get that out there by the end of the week, and we'll take a look at it.